Hi, this is Scott with Spectre Gear, and for today's video, it's Wednesday, so once again, it's Wheel Gun Wednesday. And for today's video, what I thought it would be interesting to do is do a bit of a head-to-head comparison between the most popular speed loaders currently on the market and being used by you guys out there, and to compare them for a specific firearm. And I chose the 5-shot 38 Special 357 Magnum snub nose layout, as is typified by things like the Smith & Wesson J-Frame series, the Ruger SP101, the Ruger LCR, the Charter Arms Undercover, and various other models out there that use the same 5-shot charge hole layout that's pretty standard between all of them. Those are the most popular revolvers currently in use, so I thought I'd take a look at the speed loaders available for those. Now, these are by no means the only speed loaders on the market, but these are the most popular ones. Now, anytime you compare three things to each other, you're probably going to have one that comes out ahead of the others, and that's true in this case. At least it is for me. I have a strong preference towards one of these loaders in particular. But we also have two others that are fairly similar to each other that I thought it'd be an interesting comparison on those, because while they look like they should be basically the same loader, just done differently in a cosmetic fashion, but operating the same, they actually don't. And there are some fundamental differences between them, so I thought it'd be interesting to point out what those are. So what we're going to look at today in terms of loaders is we're going to be taking a look at the Safariland Comp 1 speed loader, also actually manufactured by JFS but marketed by Safariland. We're going to take a look at the HK number 36 speed loader, and then we're going to take a look at the 5-star J1 speed loader. So I'm going to set the Comp 1 aside for now, because these two loaders they compare to each other. Again, these are the two I was alluding to earlier, where at first glance you would think basically these are the same loaders. It's just one is cosmetically different than the other. But as I said earlier, there is a couple of big differences between these two. Now, I'll back up just a second and tell you once again, if I haven't already, all of these loaders are adequate to task. They get the job done. If I was in a situation where they issued me a gun and issued me one of these loaders and I had no other choice, I could get work done with any of these loaders. But I will say some do the job slightly better than the others, but it's not one of those things where one is so bad no one should use it. I'm not saying that, and I hope no one walks away with that thought in mind. But I will say, again, in terms of comparing things, and really looking into them and deep diving and drilling down into the function of these loaders, there are differences. And for some folks, it may be dramatic enough that it would affect your decision on a personal level as to which loader you select. So, comparing the HK36 and the 5-star J1. So both are loaders that hold 5 rounds, fit a J-frame type snub nose. They release by turning the knob, which is different than the Safariland Comp 1. I'll show you that in a moment. But let's take a look at the HK36 first. Now, the body itself is manufactured from a plastic or polymer type material. It does hold the 5 rounds, and it holds the 5 rounds very, very well, in fact. And it does so, and this is a departure from early loader designs, because I've been using HKS loaders since 1981. And back then, they had a real nasty tendency. The rounds really jiggled around a lot. Now, those were the only loaders I was aware of at the time. And then one day, someone showed me a Safariland Comp 1 loader, and I was sold from that moment on and never looked back. But I did not like how loosely it held the rounds in the loader, because what would happen is it didn't deliver the rounds consistently to the charge holes, and you would get the rounds hanging up all the time. But sometime back, HKS added a little part to their loader, and what I'm referring to is this little ring right here. Between the knob and the actual loader body. And what it does is it imparts apparently some kind of tension on the bases of the cartridges to hold them in place and hold them in proper alignment with the charge holes. And that was a good idea. Now, they still have a few legacy loaders. The Bulldog 44 loader, for instance, for the Charter Arms Bulldog. That one doesn't have this ring, and it is loosey-goosey as hell, but unfortunately it's the only loader I can find for that particular gun. But they have made this upgrade to the number 36 loader, and they've also done it for the number 10, and I believe the number 586 as well. So it holds rounds pretty well, so it corrected a problem that I always had with the loader. Now, to release the rounds, what you do is you turn the knob to the right, just like so. There's a detent that releases there, and then the rounds will release, and then you turn to the left to secure the rounds within the loader. Now, in terms of being able to line up with the charge holes, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that it's holding those rounds a little more effectively allows you to easily position the loader into place and drop the rounds into the charge holes just like that. Nice and easy. And once the loader is in place, nothing hangs up, nothing catches, everything clears, and everything fits just right. And to release in, you just simply turn the knob, let the Speedloader fall away, and the rounds fall into the charge holes. Now, and I'm having, by the way, to eject these out of the cylinder because these dummy rounds that I'm using have some kind of a lacquer coating on them that makes them really hang up in the charge holes, so it's a real bitch getting them in there. But to load the loader itself, drop the rounds in, turn the knob to the left, and you are good to go. Now let me show you how the 5-star loader works. Much the same, and the layout is much the same, and also in terms of a physical comparison, the height, or rather the thickness top to bottom of the body, pretty similar. The knob is quite a bit larger on the 5-star, and it's the HKS is just a smidge taller in terms of the knob, but not that it matters or makes any difference. But here's where the differences become real apparent. The first one is there's no little stabilizing ring on here, and this thing, these rounds are loosey-goosey. And you see how they're kind of splayed out. So you see how the rounds are currently oriented here? Compare that to the HKS loader. Now, the HKS loader is holding the rounds in roughly the same approximation of the charge holes on the cylinder you're going to be loading these rounds into. This is not. You see how they're falling all over the place? And where that creates a bit of a problem is when you go to load in. You index your two, and see, I'm already having trouble indexing my first 2 rounds. Now, the way you properly speed load, and I've shown this before in videos, is you align 2. Don't try to align all 5. You align 2 rounds with 2 charge holes, and then let the rest fall into place. But the problem here is I can't get the 2 to even align. I gotta kind of jiggle it around to get everything to go into place. That is, to be honest with you, you'll get the job done, but man, is that unsatisfactory in my estimation. That's kind of a deal killer for me for selecting this loader for personal purposes, and it's the reason I don't use these for personal purposes. It's a real challenge. So that's a bit of a problem, and something that 5-star really needs to take a look at. They need to do something to stabilize those rounds more effectively, because that is seriously an issue. Now here's another issue. Let's say you're a person, I alluded earlier that I've been using HKS loader since 1981, and that is a fact. And despite the fact that I generally go with Comp 1s, I still use HKS loaders for guns that Safariland doesn't manufacture loaders for. So they're still in my system, and I still use them, particularly with in-frame 357 Magnums. I used to have some Comp 1, and I still have a couple of Comp 1 in-frame 357 Magnum loaders for my Model 27s. But they're hard to find. And so what I end up using a lot for the range are HKS loaders for that particular gun. So as I said, I'm still using those and still used to using those. Now you remember I told you that to release the rounds out of this loader, you turn the knob to the right. Okay, so let's say you've been using these loaders for, you know, what are we talking about here? We're approaching 50 years, and you're used to turning the knob to the right to release. I don't know why 5-star decided to do this, but to release the rounds on this loader, it doesn't turn to the right, it turns to the left. Now, that's not a huge deal if you're just starting out in the game, but if you've been doing this for a while, and you have muscle memory developed that under stress you get the loader in, and then you turn that knob to the right to release, it may take a moment, because remember, under stress we do what we're trained to do, we don't necessarily do what we want to do. So if you're under stress and you're trying to turn that knob that could lose you a couple of critical moments that are needed to get that gun back into action, because you have to turn to the left to release. That's kind of nuts. I'm not a fan of that at all. So this really drops the 5-star loader way down on my list. Now again, if you're new to the game, you're just getting into this, and this is the loader you select, fine. And if that's just a loader you've chosen to select because you like the way it looks or what have you, okie dokie. And some people do like the way it looks. You know, these little cutouts here are, I don't think they're there for any particular reason. I don't find them useful in terms of alignment or anything. I suppose you could say that if you could train yourself that you drop each finger there, and then it does give you pretty good alignment on those first 2 rounds that you're going to rock into the cylinder. But honestly, I can do the same thing just by holding the loader like this, which is where I usually hold it anyway, and I've got my fingers sort of right there. So it's a minor tactile upgrade. How about that? I'll give them that one. I'll say these are pretty cool little alignment holes. I won't say that they probably did this because in doing this, you save yourself on the aluminum that you're using when you put this thing together. You don't have a lot of wasted material on here, and it makes the loader lighter. So you could do that as well. So that's the 5-star and the HKS compared. Now let's take a look at the Safariland Comp 1. And I'll just tell you right now, because you probably already know, this is my preferred loader, plain and simple. And it's my preferred loader for a couple of different reasons. Now the first is going all the way back to what I told you about the loaders holding the rounds much more effectively in alignment with the charge holes. Now HKS, like I said, has helped with that. This one does it a little bit better because of the design of the loader. It allows this little star that, I don't know if you can see it, but let me grab something to point with. It's that piece right there. It actually has little legs that come off and actually hold the rounds in the proper alignment, in the proper position. This also is your release mechanism for your loader. So another thing that I've always liked about these loaders is how effectively they hold the rounds in place within the loader. Now this is something I picked up on from way back in the day when I went to I don't recall if it was an academy class or whatnot, but one of the range instructors had a trick where he would, you know, fling the loaders across the classroom against a wall and see which ones let the rounds go and which ones didn't. Now this is back in the day when pretty much everybody in the classroom had a revolver, and he would take an HKS loader of the older loosey-goosey variety, and he'd take one of these, fling them across the room, and more often than not, the HKS loader would release the rounds all over the floor. I never once saw the Safarilands do that, and I picked this habit up, and I used to do it in my classes as well when we had revolver shooters in there. So that's one extra benefit, is this holds the rounds in the loader until you're absolutely positive you want to release them. I like the release mechanism quite a bit better than the knobs. Now, some will say the knobs allow you to extract the loader from the pouch more effectively. And while that may be true, it's also true that in the act of extracting it, you're grabbing the thing that's going to release the rounds. And it is possible, and I have seen it happen, where people extracting their speed loaders out of their pouch have released the rounds from the loader before it got to the gun. Now, it does require that you have a properly designed speed loader pouch to do what I'm going to tell you to do, but I prefer always to operate the speed loader from the body. If it's an HKS loader, I don't use the knob for anything except releasing the rounds into the cylinder. I handle the speed loader from the body. I don't handle it or direct it into the cylinder from the knob. It's a lot easier to do it this way. It gives you your index points that are necessary to get the rounds in proper alignment. So and now this could of course be an outgrowth of the fact that I'm so conditioned to using the body to control the Safariland loaders. But to show you how the Safariland loader works and releases, again, same procedure, line up your 2 rounds and let the rest of the loader drop into place. Once it's in there, again, this 2 doesn't interfere with the gun at all. But once everything's in position, so you've lined up your rounds and you've dropped everything in place, you're going in that direction anyway. Why not simply just press towards the front of the gun? When you do that, this little star piece here presses against your ejector, or rather your extractor star, and it releases the rounds to fall into the cylinder, and you're good to go. So it's pretty darn quick and a very positive release. And ergonomically, it works out pretty nice as well. So altogether, all in all, as I said, I'm a big fan of the Safariland system. Not the biggest fan of the load sequence, but once you get it figured out, it's pretty simple. And let me pop this loose so I can show you that one more time. It's a minor little pain in the ass, but you drop your rounds into the charge hole, and how I found works best for me is I just put my hand over to hold the rounds in place, and I press in and turn the knob. But don't turn until it's pressed all the way forward. So you press it all the way forward until it stops, and then just give it a little bit of a right hand twist, and it'll lock everything into place. There's some folks that like to do it with it facing down. I had one instructor back in the day that was really meticulous about telling you, you hold it like this, and you just take your index finger up and then do like so. He could do that pretty consistently. I could never get that. No one else in the class could. We didn't really know what he was on about. But there's really no reason why you can't hold the loader like that to lock them in place. In fact, Safariland even sells a loading block where you drop the rounds in nose down, set your speed loader down over the top, and then lock them in place for competitions and whatnot. So there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. So of the three, obviously, like I said, the Safariland Comp 1. Let's turn this around the other way so we'll go left to right. Number one, my choice would be Safariland Comp 1, unless it's a gun that Safariland doesn't make a loader for. Now, here's another little problem. I mentioned at the very beginning that this is marketed by Safariland, and the brand name is Safariland Comp 1. And, of course, there's a Comp 2 and a Comp 3, but those are for different guns. Although it's marketed by Safariland, it is manufactured by a company called JFS. And the problem with JFS and this whole scheme is that JFS seems to have been in a state of arrested development since the mid-1980s, because that's the last time they brought out a new Speedloader design. There have been a couple of, there's a competition loader that they brought out later on, but what I'm saying is, by new designs, Speedloaders for new Revolver designs. Things like the 7-shot L-frame 357 Magnum from Smith & Wesson. Other guns such as different 32 Magnums, 5-shot 44 Specials. There's, although the Charter Arms Bulldog is a fairly old design, there's some newer designs that incorporate that same charge hole layout. They've had nothing. Essentially, they've only made Speedloaders for J-frames, K-frames, and N-frames. And of course, those carry over into Rugers, but in terms of caliber, it's pretty much just 38 357 and some 44s, and that's it. That's all you can find. And even with 44 Magnum, for instance, for some reason you can get. You have your Safariland Comp 2 loader, which is nice because it has a larger knob on it. But for the N-frames, they still manufacture the Comp 1. They never upgraded to the Comp 2. So I don't know what the deal is with JFS or with Safariland, but I wish they would upgrade their Speedloader line and kind of move things along, because other people are coming in and taking money off the table from them. And specifically, that would be HKS and 5-Star. Now, HKS and 5-Star, they manufacture Speedloaders for all of the mainstream guns, but also they manufacture Speedloaders for some of the more esoteric and exotic ones, like the 7-shot 357s. And so anytime a new Revolver comes out, these companies are manufacturing a Speedloader for it in fairly short order, so they're staying current with the market. So if you do have one of those guns that Safariland doesn't make a loader for, you're going to be left with one of these two companies. Of the two, I'm going to lean towards HKS every single time. For the reasons I outlined earlier with the 5-Star, the HKS is just a superior loader. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that one of the reasons I talk about Speedloaders a lot, and one of the reasons I talk about revolvers in general, is that I'm an active revolver shooter. This little J-frame, in fact, is the gun that rides in my pocket when I can't carry a gun, so it's my my deep cover gun. But I carry a revolver every day. I try at least 2 or 3 times a year, I'll try to wear an auto loader. I usually go about 2 weeks, and then I'm back to carrying a revolver almost immediately. It's just something that I do, and I have my reasons for it that I'll outline in other videos and some that I've already talked about. But I like revolvers. But because I also own a gear company, we also manufacture a full line of Speedloader pouches for Speedloaders, for revolver users. And one of the things about these Speedloader carriers is, like I mentioned earlier with that thing on the knob, my Speedloader pouches don't require you to grab that knob. What you do is you index off of the bottom by just pressing up on the rounds and letting the loader drop naturally into your hand. We've had pretty good results with these pouches. They last a long time. In fact, when I first brought these to market, one of the videos that I did to introduce it, I talked about the fact that I had been carrying a specific set of Speedloader pouches, 2 of them, on my belt. At that time, I think it had been like 7 or 8 years I carried the same Speedloader pouch. It's the longest long-term test I've ever done of any product, because I carried and used these things for almost 14 years before we even marketed them, because I wasn't sure if there was enough interest in the market to actually produce these. Turns out this certainly is. So if you're interested in Speedloader pouches for these Speedloaders that I've just talked about, please visit us at spectorgear.com and have a look at the selection we have there. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and end it at this point. Thank you for watching and or listening. This is Scott from Spector Gear. Have a wonderful day.